news tonight. A Malaysia Airlines flight with 239 people on board, including 4 Americans, has gone missing.
Cynthia, here at Beijing's International Airport, it was more than 4 hours.
But investigators have now officially declared the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 an accident, and the 239 souls on board are now officially presumed dead.
Whether the disappearance is due to mechanical problems, pilot error, or even terrorism.
Sources tell CNN First Officer Farik Hamid's cell phone was on and searching for service roughly half an hour after all of Flight 370's communications mysteriously shut off.
Hello and welcome back, fellow truth seekers, to another episode of Conspiracy Chronicles. As always, I'm your host, Gurkam Yüksel, and today we're delving into one of the most perplexing mysteries in aviation history, the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. So, it's been almost a decade since the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines 370, with more conspiracies than there are factual information. So, what exactly happened? On March 8, 2014, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 took off from Kuala Lumpur Airport just like any other flight that day. It was destined for Beijing, but that flight would never reach its destination. Instead, it just vanished into thin air, sparking a worldwide obsession with conspiracies, mysteries, and of course, a lot of unanswered questions. So stick around as we dive into some of these questions and conspiracy theories. So before speaking to the conspiracy theories surrounding the disappearance of MH370, let's go over some of the facts that we know about the flight and its flight path. The flight path of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 are based on information gathered from radar data, satellite communications, and, of course, investigative reports. While there's still much uncertainty about the exact details of the flight's path, here are the key facts regarding its known trajectory. So, MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia at 12:41 a.m. local time on March 8, 2014. Its destination, as we know, was Beijing Capital International Airport in China, and an IFR flight plan was filed with the regulatory officials. Let's take a quick listen to the aircraft communications. At 12:25 a.m., MH370 made its first contact to air traffic control. This is where they were requesting their clearance.
Delivery Malaysian 370, good morning.
Malaysian 370 standby and Malaysian 6 is cleared to Frankfurt via Agosa Alpha departure, 6,000 feet squawk 2106. Malaysian 370, request level.
370, we are ready, requesting flight level 350 to Beijing.
At 12:26 a.m., ATC cleared MH370 to Beijing via PIBOS GPS fix and a departure altitude of 6,000 feet. Their squawk code, the number entered into the transponder and what shows up on ATC's radar, was 2157, and then they were transferred over to ground control.
Malaysian 370 is cleared to Beijing via PIBOS Alpha departure, 6,000 feet squawk 2157.
Beijing, People San Frank 6000, squawk 2157. Malaysian 370, thank you.
Malaysian 370, welcome over the ground.
Good day, sir.
Now, between 12:27 a.m. and 12:36 a.m., MH370 was pushing back from the gate and taxiing to runway 32 right. At 2:40 a.m., MH370 was officially cleared for takeoff by the tower.
370, run up to Alpha 10. Run up to Alpha 10, Malaysia 370.
370, 32 right of takeoff. Nice.
370 right of takeoff, Malaysia 37. Thank you.
The last known communication between the aircraft and air traffic control occurred at 1:19 a.m., when the plane was over the South China Sea. At this point, the aircraft was flying normally and showed no signs of distress. This was the last time anyone heard from MH370, and as you can hear, everything seemed and sounded quite normal.
Malaysian 370.
Malaysian 370, selamat pagi. Identified climb flight level 180, cancel SID term contact Lumpur radar 1326, good night.
Alright, 1326 Malaysian 370.
So here we can hear them getting clearance to climb to higher altitudes. At 12:46 a.m., MH370 was handed over to Lumpur radar and was cleared to climb to 25,000 feet.
Control Malaysian 370.
Malaysian 370, Lumpur radar, good morning. Climb flight level 250.
Morning, level 250, Malaysian 370.
4 minutes later, at 12:50 a.m., MH370 was cleared up to their requested cruising altitude of 35,000 feet.
Malaysian 370, climb flight level 350.
Climb level 350, Malaysian 370.
10 minutes later, at 1:01 a.m., MH370 reached their designated altitude and radioed ATC to let them know that they were now maintaining 35,000 feet. Interestingly, though, 6 minutes later, at 1:07 a.m., MH370 radios back to ATC to state the exact same thing once again.
Malaysian 370, maintaining level 350.
Malaysian 370.
Malaysian 370, maintaining level 350.
Malaysian 370.
12 minutes following, at precisely 1:19 a.m., MH370 was handed off to Ho Chi Minh on frequency 120.9. And goodnight, Malaysian 370 were the last words heard from the MH370 pilots.
Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
At approximately 1:21 a.m., the aircraft's transponder, which sends out the information about the plane's identity and altitude, was disabled. This was the first indication that something unusual was happening. After the transponder was disabled, MH370 deviated from its planned flight path, making a sharp left turn to the southwest. It began flying back across the Malay Peninsula, heading toward the southern Indian Ocean. We know that the Malaysian military radar continued to track the aircraft after the transponder was turned off. It's known that the plane followed a complex path, making several turns and altitude changes. It flew westward, then turned south and eventually southwest. The aircraft's satellite communication system, also known as Inmarsat, continued to exchange handshake signals with the satellite. This allowed investigators to estimate that the plane continued flying for several hours after the last radar contact. Based on analysis of satellite data, the search for MH370 focused on a remote area in the southern Indian Ocean, approximately 2,000 kilometers off the coast of Western Australia. This area was determined to be the most likely location for the plane's final resting place. Now forward 4 years, and in July 2018, the official search for MH370 was suspended after an extensive underwater search failed to locate the main wreckage. The Malaysian government officially declared the disappearance of MH370 an accident and stated that all 239 passengers and crew on board were presumed dead. But despite the suspension of the official search, there have been ongoing efforts by independent groups to locate the wreckage.
Investigators have now officially declared the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 an accident, and the 239 souls on board are now officially presumed dead. While that may be of little comfort to their loved ones, it will allow those families to at least move forward with compensation claims. In all these months' time, not a seat cushion or a styrofoam cup, not a shred of debris from the aircraft has been spotted or found.
Now let's dig deep into some of the conspiracies surrounding the disappearance of MH370. The first theory we will discuss is the claim that MH370 was hijacked by terrorists. This theory gained attention in the immediate aftermath of MH370's disappearance and is rooted in the idea that foul play was involved in diverting the flight from its planned route to Beijing.
Mike Glynn flew Qantas passenger jets for 32 years and before that spent 7 years in the Air Force, so he knows what he's talking about and is now writing a book on the doomed Malaysian flight. And Mike joins us now. Mike, good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. So first of all, I should ask, what's your theory on what happened?
My theory is that the aircraft was hijacked, if you like, by one of the pilots. There was obviously some evident expertise on that flight deck that night after the aircraft disappeared. I think once you work through all the possible scenarios, that's the one that stands out as by far the most probable.
Some speculate that the hijacking of MH370 could have been politically motivated. This could involve making demands related to political issues, releasing political prisoners, or forcing governments to change their policies. It's important to emphasize that no known terrorist organization or group claimed responsibility for the disappearance of MH370, nor did they make any specific demands related to the incident. The absence of such claims or demands has been a significant factor to the mystery surrounding the flight. The official investigations and extensive background checks conducted on passengers and crew members did not uncover any links to political organizations or individuals with known political motives that would explain the aircraft's disappearance. The lack of concrete information regarding the motivations behind the flight's deviation remains one of the central enigmas of the MH370 case. Now, another theory implies that terrorists may have wanted to use the aircraft as a weapon to carry out acts of terrorism, similar to those events of September 11th. This could involve crashing the plane into a significant target or causing mass casualties. Proponents of this theory believe that the hijackers aimed to crash the plane into a government building, military installation, or densely populated area. This would result in mass casualties and create widespread fear and chaos. So if you think about it, the intention behind using the plane as a weapon would be to create global impact, garner international attention, and quite potentially force governments to change their policies or actions. The theory suggests that the hijacking was meticulously planned and executed, involving individuals or groups with a high level of coordination and aviation knowledge. Okay, so one of the significant challenges to this theory is the absence of any credible claims of responsibility by known terrorist organizations or individuals. Typically, terrorist groups claim responsibility for their actions to advance their agendas. Extensive background checks and investigations into the passengers and the crew did not reveal any immediate links to terrorism or individuals with motives aligned to this theory. Critics argue that the complexity of the flight path changes, including the multiple turns and altitude changes made by MH370, suggests a high level of aviation knowledge. It would be challenging for non-professionals or terrorists to execute such maneuvers. Despite extensive investigations, no concrete evidence has been found to directly support the theory that MH370 was used as a weapon for acts of terrorism. Okay, so let's take a different direction. What if hijackers had financial motives, such as demanding a ransom for the release of passengers and the aircraft? Alternatively, they could have intended to use the passengers and plane as bargaining chips for negotiations with governments or organizations. Proponents of this theory argue that hijackers may have sought to exploit the situation by demanding a substantial ransom for the airline, governments, or other entities in exchange for the release of the passengers and the safe return of the aircraft. The motive behind this theory centers on financial gain, with the hijackers using passengers and the aircraft as leverage to secure the significant sum of money. Unlike some other conspiracy theories, this theory does not necessarily require a public claim of responsibility. Instead, it suggests that the perpetrators may have sought to maintain secrecy to maximize their chances of receiving ransom. But one of the primary challenges to this theory is the absence of any credible ransom demands or negotiations. Typically, in cases involving a ransom, demands are made explicitly either to governments, airlines, or public entities. Okay, so let's take another turn and explore the conspiracy theory that suggests that the hijackers may have sought to create fear, uncertainty, and chaos on a global scale by diverting the airplane. This could be a form of psychological warfare with unclear objectives. Proponents of this theory argue that the perpetrators may have intended to create a sense of insecurity and vulnerability within the global aviation industry and among the public at large. This theory suggests that the motive was not tied to any particular cause or agenda, but instead the perpetrators may have sought to generate chaos and confusion without clear objectives. By orchestrating a disappearance of this magnitude, the theory implies that those responsible wanted to ensure that MH370 would remain a topic of global discussion and speculation, drawing significant media coverage. Challenges to this theory, however, is the lack of any credible claims, manifestos, or statements by individuals or groups taking responsibility for MH370's diversion. Typically, acts of terrorism or hijacking with specific ideological objectives involve the release of such statements. Large-scale aviation incidents intended solely for psychological warfare purposes are rare and not typically associated with hijackings or diversions. The conspiracy theory of government involvement in the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 suggests that a government, possibly the Malaysian government or another nation with interests in the region, was involved in the disappearance of the aircraft. This theory implies that government authorities may have played a role in the plane's deviation from its planned route and subsequent disappearance. Proponents of this theory argue that a government may have had specific political goals or objectives, such as undermining a rival nation or advancing its own geopolitical interests, which led to the hijacking or diversion of the aircraft. The theory suggests that the lack of transparency, conflicting information, and the apparent failure of search and rescue efforts could be indicative of a government-led cover-up to hide its involvement.
They made this announcement today. Is it really true? What's their proof? First of all, they have not been able to confirm any suspected floating objects. They simply made this announcement today, telling us that no one survived, everyone sank into the ocean. What's your proof?
Our relatives were on that flight. This wasn't an accident. Instead, it was caused by the Malaysian government. They are covering up something.
It's been 17 days. They simply just give us this result. How can people bear this? The Chinese government of ours should come forward and clarify and tell us. My mother, this happened on the 8th. She died on the 9th. Tell us, how do I live?
During the investigation into the disappearance of MH370, there were instances of conflicting information and communication from the Malaysian government. These inconsistencies in the information provided by the Malaysian authorities added to the confusion surrounding the incident and fueled suspicions and conspiracy theories. Firstly, the timeline of when the aircraft disappeared and when authorities were alerted seemed to shift during the early stages of the investigation. The initial accounts of when MH370 lost contact and when search and rescue operations began were not consistently reported. There were also discrepancies in the radar data and flight path information also released by the Malaysian officials. At times, different government spokespeople provided conflicting details about the plane's last known location, altitude, and speed. In the hours following MH370's disappearance, there were reports that the aircraft's communication systems, including the transponder and aircraft communication addressing and reporting system, also known as ACARS, were disabled at different times. These discrepancies in the official statements added to confusion about the plane's course of action after it lost contact. As the search for MH370 expanded to the Indian Ocean, there were instances when the search area were adjusted and relocated based on satellite data. This led to uncertainty about where the plane might be located. The release of information about the passengers and crew aboard the flight also led to conflicting reports. Initial background checks and investigations into the passengers' backgrounds were inconsistent and sometimes inaccurate. The release of satellite data and its interpretation was another area where conflicting information arose. Various experts and organizations provided different analysis of the satellite data, leading to different theories about the plane's flight path and potential crash location. The way information was shared with the media and the public sometimes appeared disorganized, with different officials providing updates and statements that did not always align. This added to the perception of confusion and inconsistency. While these discrepancies in information fueled public frustration and added to the conspiracy theories, they were also a reflection of the challenges faced by authorities in managing a high-stakes and highly complex investigation. Ultimately, the Malaysian government, along with the international agencies, conducted extensive searches and investigations to the best of their abilities. but the mystery of MH370's disappearance and the conflicting information surrounding it remain unresolved. Also, where national security is concerned, the government cover-up theory implies that the actions taken regarding MH370 may have been seen as necessary for national security reasons, such as preventing sensitive information or materials on the plane from falling into the wrong hands. Accusations of government involvement in a covert operation have significant diplomatic and geopolitical implications. Such allegations can strain international relations and lead to calls for investigations and transparency. Numerous investigations, including independent international efforts, have failed to uncover conclusive evidence supporting this theory. The official investigations led by the Malaysian government and international authorities did not find evidence implicating any government. The Diego Garcia theory claims that MH370 was remotely hijacked and commandeered, possibly through cyber attacks or other technological means, and that it was then directed to land at Diego Garcia, where it could have been hidden or concealed. The alleged motive behind this theory varies, but often involves political, intelligence, or military objectives.
We would not even be talking about Diego Garcia, this small island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, if it were not for the conspiracy theories about it, ones flooding not only the usual murky depths of the internet, but also spilling out into mainstream locations, such as the White House briefing room.
Some news reports saying that the missing flight could have landed in the U.S. military base, Diego Garcia, in the center of Indian Ocean. Do you rule in that or rule out that?
I'll rule that one out.
Proponents of this theory argue that the lack of transparency and information regarding MH370's disappearance, along with the failure of search and rescue efforts, may be indicative of a cover-up by government agencies. The theory argues that advanced technology could have been used to remotely hijack or control MH370. This would allow for the perpetrators to divert the aircraft without being on board. Modern commercial aircraft are equipped with highly sophisticated flight control systems. Is it possible to take remote control? Short answer, yes. However, these systems are designed to ensure the safety and security of the aircraft. They are designed with multiple layers of redundancy and security to prevent unauthorized access or tampering. Access to the critical systems of an aircraft is tightly controlled. Physical access to the cockpit is restricted, and electronic systems are protected by secure protocols and firewalls to prevent unauthorized intrusion. Also, commercial aircraft are designed with features that allow pilots to override automated systems and take manual control of the aircraft in case of emergencies or unexpected situations. The pilots have ultimate control over the aircraft at all times. Aircraft manufacturers and airlines invest heavily in cybersecurity to protect their systems from hacking and cyber attacks. The aviation industry places strong emphasis on maintaining integrity and security of communication systems and avionics. Successfully taking control of an aircraft remotely would require deep understanding of aviation systems, protocols, and the technology. It would involve overcoming multiple layers of security and encryption. While there have been discussions and demonstrations regarding the potential vulnerabilities of some of the aviation systems to cyber attacks, these discussions often focus on the need for increased cybersecurity measures to protect against potential threats. Actual instances of remotely taking control of a commercial aircraft without authorization are extremely rare, if not non-existent. So, one of the primary challenges to this theory is the absence of concrete evidence directly implicating any government, military, or even intelligence agency in the disappearance of MH370. Critics argue that orchestrating such a complex operation involving a commercial airliner would require an immensely high level of coordination, resources, and secrecy, making it that much more difficult to execute without detection. The theory of alien abduction or extraterrestrial involvement is a highly speculative and unconventional explanation for the disappearance of MH370. This theory suggests that the aircraft was intercepted, abducted, or otherwise influenced by extraterrestrial beings. Some proponents of this theory suggest that the aircraft, along with its passengers and crew, may have been abducted by aliens for unknown purposes. This claim often includes assertions that the plane was taken to an undisclosed location in outer space. Other claims that UFOs, which are typically associated with unexplained aerial phenomena, may have played a role in the disappearance. The theory suggests that UFOs may have either caused the plane to vanish or intervened during the flight. The theory often implies that these extraterrestrial beings possess highly advanced technology that allows them to manipulate or control Earth's aircraft and infrastructure. The challenge to this theory is the complete lack of empirical evidence supporting the involvement of extraterrestrial beings or UFOs in the disappearance of MH370. It relies solely on anecdotal accounts, speculation, and beliefs rather than verifiable facts. No credible scientific or investigative organizations have corroborated claims of alien involvement in the disappearance. Official investigations have focused on conventional explanations, such as mechanical failures or human actions. The principle of Occam's razor, which suggests that the simplest explanation is often the most likely, favors conventional explanations over highly complex and speculative ones involving alien abduction. The alien abduction theory remains largely confined to fringe and pseudoscientific circles. It is not taken seriously by mainstream scientific or aviation communities. The official investigations into the disappearance of MH370 have not considered or supported this theory, and the focus remains on conventional aviation-related factors in their search for answers. The suicidal pilot theory is one of the hypotheses that has been considered in the investigation into the disappearance of MH370. The theory suggests that one of the pilots, specifically Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, may have intentionally caused the plane's diversion and disappearance, either as an act of suicide or with other malicious intent.
First, we've got a lot of new details to tell you about in what really has become perhaps the world's most baffling aviation mystery ever. The investigation now focusing on the pilot and the co-pilot. The pilot is named Zahari Ahmed Shah. He's a 53-year-old grandfather. He has a flight simulator in his home in Kuala Lumpur and more than 18,000 hours of flying time. Neighbors say he's a well-respected father and a member of the community, although there are questions this morning about his ties to a controversial political party.
And the co-pilot, meantime, is Farik Hamid. He's a 27-year-old co-pilot who lived at home with his parents. Friends and family say he was religious and serious about his career. He's clocked 2,700 hours of flying, and Malaysian Airlines says they were shocked when pictures surfaced of the co-pilot posing with young ladies in the cockpit during a flight, which, of course, is a security violation.
Meanwhile,
proponents of this theory argue that the flight's diversion from its planned route was the result of deliberate actions, including the disabling of communication systems and a series of turns and altitude changes. These type of actions are not consistent with normal flight procedures. The theory explores potential motives, which may include personal issues, psychological factors, or other undisclosed reasons that led to one of the pilots to take such actions. However, no definitive motive has been established as of yet. Critics of this theory point out that no distress calls or communication were made from the plane, which is unusual in cases of mechanical failures or emergencies. This raises questions about whether the pilots may have intentionally cut off communication. Malaysian authorities discovered that Captain Zahari, the pilot of MH370, had a personal flight simulator in his home. On the simulator, he had practiced various flight scenarios, including routes that resembled the flight path of MH370. Reports indicated that the data found on Captain Zahari's simulator included simulated flight paths that involved routes over remote and uninhabited areas of the southern Indian Ocean, which is where MH370 was believed to have gone missing. It's important to note that having a flight simulator is not uncommon among aviation enthusiasts. Many pilots use simulators, including myself, for training and to enhance our skills. Simulators are often used to simulate various flight conditions and emergencies, or in my case, simply just to fly for fun. However, the fact that Captain Zahari had practiced routes on a simulator similar to that of MH370's diversion raised suspicions and concerns. Some believe that this could be indicative of premeditated actions related to the flight's diversion. The discovery of the simulator data raised questions about Captain Zahari's intent and whether his actions on the simulator were related to the plane's disappearance. Investigators explored whether the simulator data might provide insights into his motivations or intentions. As part of the investigation, Captain Zahari's background, psychological state, and personal life were examined. While some aspects of his personal life were scrutinized, there was no concrete evidence linking his simulator activities to the disappearance of MH370.
Peter, what can you tell us about the pilot? What kind of man is he?
I'm a friend of Captain Zahari. He is a very friendly, caring, and very professional guy who's committed to his job and who loves flying.
When was the last time you spoke with him, and how did he seem to you?
I spoke to him about a week before the incident, and he was his usual self, his usual jovial self, and we had arranged to meet up again soon.
Have you been able to reach his wife, his family, or any idea how they are dealing with all this?
Unfortunately, no. I've sent messages to the wife, but I've not had any response yet.
I've read that he built a flight simulator at his house. Did you see that? Can you tell me about it?
Okay, yes, he has informed or mentioned that he has built a flight simulator in his house, and he has invited me a couple of times to go there, but because of time, I have not been able to do so. An interesting story on this is that he's also mentioned that flying on the flight simulator is certainly much more challenging than flying real life, because on real life, in most of the cases, you would have almost perfect situation, unlike the simulator where you can create situations.
So he would create different scenarios that he could try out on the flight simulator.
Yeah, that's what he mentioned to me.
There are obviously still so many things we don't know about what happened to this aircraft, what happened to your friend. Obviously, there are those who believe or worry that the crew may have played some sort of role in the plane's disappearance. As the pilot's friend, what do you say to that?
For investigation purposes, obviously the investigators would investigate into every angle of it. In aspects of the crew being involved in it, I cannot speak about the other members of the crew, but certainly as far as Captain Zahari is concerned, he is a very professional pilot and who loves his job, who loves flying, and I wouldn't think that he would be in any way involved in it.
You didn't see anything unusual or out of character about his behavior over the last few months?
Certainly not. He's the usual self, the same person that I've known for the last over 2 years.
What has this been like for you? I mean, to know somebody on board, to know the pilot, how have you been coping?
With difficulty. We go through, at least for myself, I go through an emotional roller coaster. Each time you hear something positive, you hope for the best, and then it's a false lead. You go back to square one. Yeah, so it's been difficult, and I can imagine, the families of the people involved would be 10 times, 20, 30 times worse.
Yeah.
The accidental shoot-down theory regarding Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 is a hypothesis that suggests that the aircraft may have mistakenly been shot down by a military or defense system of a country in the region. This theory speculates that MH370's deviation from its flight path and its eventual disappearance may have been the result of a tragic accident rather than intentional actions. Proponents of this theory argue that MH370's deviation from its planned flight route and loss of communication may have led military or defense personnel to perceive it as a threat or unidentified aircraft. This could have triggered a response leading to the accidental firing of missiles or other defensive measures. The theory suggests that the absence of distress calls or communication from the aircraft may have contributed to the confusion, as air traffic controllers or military personnel may have been unaware of the plane's true status. The theory is often linked to the regional tensions and conflicts, suggesting that the heightened military alertness or concerns over airspace violations could have increased the likelihood of an accidental shootdown. Reports of witnesses claiming to have seen fire or missiles in the air during the time of MH370's disappearance add a layer of intrigue to the story. The witnesses described seeing unusual or unexplained phenomena in the sky around the time that the plane went missing. One of the primary challenges to this theory is the absence of physical evidence, such as a missile fragment or wreckage indicating a shootdown. The extensive search efforts for MH370 have not produced such evidence whatsoever. Also important to note is that modern military defense systems are equipped with advanced identification and communication protocols to avoid accidental shootdowns. It would be highly unusual for such systems to target a civilian airliner without a clear threat. Satellite data tracking MH370's flight path does not indicate any abrupt or extreme maneuvers consistent with evading a missile or encountering a hostile military response. And extensive search efforts have been conducted in the southern Indian Ocean, where it is believed MH370 went down based on satellite data. This does not align with the theory of an accidental shootdown over a landmass or within a country's airspace. While witness sightings of fire or missiles may be a part of the broader context surrounding MH370's disappearance, they do not provide conclusive evidence to support this theory. The last topic we will cover today, in a long list of other theories we haven't touched, includes a rather interesting one. A man by the name of Richard Godfrey claims he can track the flight path and trajectory of MH370 by examining the ham radio signal disturbances as the flight trekked down through the Indian Ocean. The claim here is that an object passing through these ham radio signals will most certainly cause a disturbance, or a signal reflection, if you will, which can be tracked. And according to Richard, there was only one aircraft flying in that region at that specific time, which he believes to be MH370. Interestingly, if you look at the plotted flight path from the radio signal disturbances, it matches the satellite pings taken every 2 minutes from Inmarsat. Except that Richard claims his method of tracking is far more accurate. Richard's claim sheds credibility to the pilot-controlled theory, in that the aircraft was hand-flown and not on autopilot. This is based on the precise flight path tracking that he plotted from the ham radio disturbances. One of the claims proposes that the radio disturbances show that MH370 at one point went into a holding pattern. This is where the aircraft circles around in a rectangular path. As a licensed pilot myself, I can attest that this usually happens for several reasons, and things we are trained to do in case of navigation failures or emergency situations. However, the initial and most reasonable explanation would be if ATC, or potentially military communications, put them in this hold pattern for traffic avoidance. This theory leads to credibility regarding military exercises taking place in the area, an accidental shootdown, and of course potentially a government cover-up of such an incident. The holding pattern could have been to potentially ensure MH370 was not in the way of these exercises or military jets flying at high speeds. Another reason to go into a holding pattern, and usually happens solely from the discretion of the pilot, is if your onboard GPS is no longer reliable, and you need to check your current position, plot a change of course on a paper map, or conduct fuel calculations based on flight time and fuel on board. Of course, this theory suggests that onboard systems went offline, which is quite probable and explains the fact that other trackable systems such as the transponder also went offline, and the pilots were left to fend for themselves in the air. This theory also suggests that if these systems went offline, the communication radios may have gone offline as well, preventing the pilots from communicating with ATC and, tragically, any mayday calls. There were reports that Farik Abdul Hamid, the first officer of MH370, had attempted to make cell phone calls while the aircraft was in flight. This call was reportedly made shortly after the plane's communication systems ceased functioning. The information about the cell phone call came from a series of satellite data exchanges known as handshakes. The evidence regarding the cell phone call remains inconclusive. It is uncertain whether the call was successfully connected, and even if it was, the content of the call and its purpose are unknown. There was no definitive confirmation of a connection between the cell phone and ground-based networks. Richard Godfrey's claim that his tracking is far more accurate shows a flight path, although similar to that of Inmarsat, with far more directional deviation and, of course, a final resting place of MH370. As of today, there have been no search or military efforts underway to search this area for the wreckage, and Richard's theory is still yet to be fully scrutinized.
Richard has spent the last 9 months using new tracking technology mapping the plane's final movements, and he believes he's found its final location, 1,900 kilometres west of Perth, lying at a depth of 4,000 metres.
Richard Godfrey joins us now live from Frankfurt. Richard, this is amazing. How confident are you that you've found the plane?
Oh, good morning to you. I'm very confident. We have quite a lot of data from the Inmarsat satellite. We have oceanography, drift analysis. We have the performance data from Boeing. And now with this new technology, we have the WhisperNet data, and all four align at a particular point in the southern Indian Ocean.
Today, we delve deep into the case of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, exploring the multifaceted conspiracy theories and speculative explanations surrounding its disappearance. This perplexing aviation mystery continues to captivate the world's imagination with questions that remain unanswered to this day. We began by examining the conspiracy theories that have emerged in the wake of MH370's vanishing act. These include claims of extraterrestrial involvement, remote control, and government cover-ups. We discussed how these theories, while captivating, often lack empirical evidence and face significant challenges when scrutinized. The theory of extraterrestrial involvement suggests that the aircraft may have been intercepted, manipulated, or even abducted by aliens or UFOs. However, there's no credible evidence to support this hypothesis, and the official investigations have not even considered it. The idea of remote control considers that advanced technology or cyber attacks could have been used to hijack MH370 remotely. This theory faces complexity and evidence challenges, as well as questions about motive. Government cover-up theories speculate that government or state actors deliberately concealed the truth about MH370's disappearance for political, military, or intelligence reasons. While this is intriguing, these theories often lack credible evidence and face logistical hurdles. Next, we explored the suicidal pilot theory, which suggests that one of the pilots, Captain Zahari, may have intentionally diverted the plane with malicious intent. This theory, while considered during the investigation, lacks conclusive evidence. We also took a closer look at the discovery of flight simulator data on Captain Zahari's computer, which raised questions about his actions and motivations. However, this data did not provide definitive answers and was part of a broader investigation. Then, we discussed the intriguing notion of an accidental shoot-down theory, proposing that MH370 might have been mistakenly targeted by a military defense system. While witness sightings of fire and missiles in the air added complexity to this theory, it remains speculative and unproven. Lastly, we explored the idea that MH370 crashed into the deep ocean due to system malfunction. This theory suggests that all onboard systems went offline simultaneously, and the pilots hand-flew the aircraft. While captivating, this theory lacks concrete evidence, and the proposed theory has yet to be fully scrutinized for credibility. In the end, the mystery of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 remains unsolved. Despite extensive international efforts, the exact circumstances of its disappearance continue to elude us. It is essential to remember that speculation and conspiracy theories, while intriguing, should be approached with skepticism and critical thinking. The search for the truth in this case remains ongoing, and we can only hope that one day the mystery surrounding MH370 will be unraveled. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us on this journey into the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines 370. I'm your host, Görkem Yüksel, and this was Conspiracy Chronicles Unveiling the Truth. If you like what you're hearing in our podcast, let us know by giving us a 5-star rating. We also encourage you to get involved in our episodes by leaving us feedback. You can find us on Facebook or simply leave us a feedback on Spotify. Until next week, stay curious, stay informed, and of course, stay connected.